my channel, Adventures with Amirah. I have a lot of you girls out there that have contacted me through my social media accounts as well as just through here on YouTube to let me know that my PCOS story really touched base with you guys and that you wanted me to do more videos on my experiences with that. And I figure, why not? I mean, we're here to share information with one another. If I'm ever telling you things and you have information for me too, please feel free to share it with me in a comment down below, or if you want something more private, you can check me out on Facebook at Adventures with Amirah and send me a message directly and I will get back to you. So today I want to talk to you about doctors specifically that will not listen to you. And what's so interesting is that there are still doctors who do not understand PCOS. It is so frustrating because doctors are very expensive, especially when you're going to specialists like endocrinologist and gynecologist. And you know, it's not like a regular family practice medicine thing that you're going to. You're actually paying more normally for a copay or whatever the fee is to go see this specialist, and sometimes they don't know any more than your family practice medicine doctor would have. So I wanted to talk to you about things that I've gone through and then how to cope with that and how to deal with doctors, you know, in a manner that can be more helpful to you, and how to know when to just move on. So for me, I touched on this a little bit in my last video about PCOS, but for me it was even hard to get diagnosed. It took forever. I had seen so many specialists. Nobody seemed to come up with a diagnosis, and I forgot to mention in that video, but guess who diagnosed me? It was not a doctor, it was actually a nurse. I was in for a routine physical. I got my annual pap smear done, and you know, she was just sitting there and she had asked me about my period, and of course, you know, I hadn't had periods in years, so I was like, I don't know when my last period was. And then they're always like, are you pregnant? You're like, no, I'm not pregnant, I don't have a period. And then they're like, what do you mean you don't have a period? And then she started asking me questions. Now, I have been to doctor after doctor, fertility specialist after fertility specialist, and none of them ever bothered to ask me the questions that this nurse asked me. She said, I noticed that you have a lot of hair on your arms. And of course I was like, oh my God, I just want to die of embarrassment. I was like, yes ma'am, you know. She was like, has that always been a problem? I said, well, it was more so, you know, as I got a little bit older, it was more blonde when I was younger, but it got dark. My husband says it's fine. I mean, he's like, oh, it's cute. I'm like, yeah, like Chewbacca cute. No, not cute at all. But anyway, he doesn't care, but I'm more self-conscious about it. So I wax my arms, and that is the easiest thing that I found to do. I just take wax strips that you get like Sally Hansen or whatever, and it does keep the hair from growing back as thick. I used to shave my arms when I was younger because I just didn't know any better, and that just makes the hair more coarse and darker and everything else. So girls, if you can stand to wax your arms, do that. It's much easier and it keeps the hair from coming back so fast. But anyway, back then I had not done that. And this nurse noticed that, and she said, well, have you always had problems with your periods? And I said, yes. And then she said, well, you know, she kind of got my age of onset for my period, which I didn't get my period till a little bit later. I probably was closer to 14 when I finally got my period. And what else did she ask me? She asked, had I had a huge weight gain? And I said, well, yes, actually when I was about 22, I gained 80 pounds in 1 year for no apparent reason. Like, I still was exercising, I still was eating the same thing. Like, has anybody ever tested you for PCOS? And I'm like, what is that? You know, and at that time, actually, she called it PCOD. So in some countries, they call it PCOD, polycystic ovarian disease, and some places they call it PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, and some doctors now just call it PCOS. You find all types of things now, but I was like, I don't even know what that is. And she was like, I wonder, do you have cyst on your ovaries? She said, do you ever have really bad pain in your abdomen? And I said, yes, sometimes, you know, almost like a period cramp, but like bring you to your knees in pain. And she goes, I bet you've had cysts that have ruptured. She was like, no doctors ever mentioned this to you? And I was like, no, and I have seen specialists all over that. It was just so strange. I don't know what was going on, why I could not find a medical professional that knew what they were doing. But this lady took the time. They ended up having to do a vaginal ultrasound, which is where they take a wand and they put it inside of you. And that's probably really hard if you're a teenager, you know, especially if you're not active yet or you're not married or something, you know. And you don't want something like that in you, but they do have to do that normally sometimes to see the ovaries, to get a better view. And they did one of those on me. Was there with me actually for that visit, and I mean, it was just so uncomfortable, you know, because they have to put so much pressure and stuff when they're trying to get good pictures or good vision of your ovaries. She said, you have cysts all in your ovaries, you know. And so I was like, well, I guess I've always had that, because the pain that she was talking about I had experienced, you know, periodically, and it was never really with a period or anything like that. You hear about women that have menstrual cramps, so I would think, well, maybe this is what, you know, a menstrual cramp is. I would think that this is normal, and I'm just not having a period with it. And she was like, no, that kind of pain, I know what you're talking about. She was like, that kind of pain is not normal. So it's just something I never would have known unless this nurse had asked me. So it was at that time that she said, well, you obviously have PCOS. I asked the doctor when they finally came in, you know, why has nobody ever mentioned this to me? And he was like, I need to look more into this. And it was just kind of really sketchy. And I actually went to a fertility specialist once. She was a fertility endocrinologist, and I was going to her to see about the insulin resistance, and she was like, well, you just have diabetes, you need to go somewhere else. I had already been to several other doctors like that were saying, you know, you're not diabetic, you actually have something else going on with your endocrine system, you need to see a specialist, you need to see an endocrinologist. And I remember fighting her for that copay, because I was like, I'm not going to pay you, I told you exactly what I was coming here for. They asked about what I was coming there for before they made the appointment, and then I get there and she says, oh, I can't help you, and sends me right back out the door. Like, literally, I saw her for about 3 minutes. And what was so strange is, this is just a sidestep, but what was so strange is I had my son with me at the time. He was a baby. He was probably about 2, and he was always such a good child. Like, he's super quiet. You give him some little blocks or Legos or crayon, never makes a peep, right? She obviously could not stand kids. Have you ever been around people like that, that just the thought of kids make their skin crawl or something? That's how she acted, but she was a fertility specialist. And I'm thinking, lady, you are in the wrong career. Because she was like, is he going to be on the floor there? Yes, ma'am. I was like, he's just going to sit right here next to me. He's coloring. And she goes, okay, well, just make sure he doesn't touch my desk or something like that. And I was like, why would he touch your desk? Like, he's a baby. He can't get out. It was just so weird. I was like, no, ma'am, he doesn't touch other people's things. First of all, I taught my kids, you don't touch things that don't belong to you. Even when he was 2, he knew not to do that. So it was just so odd. And then I just, you know, I'm thinking, well, gosh, I've finally gone to an endocrinologist. That was absolutely a waste of time. And that's the thing. When you have a doctor who obviously can't help you, now she was upfront about it. I don't know what to do with you. Go somewhere else, which was rude, but at least she told me up front, right? But some doctors, you'll keep going back, and it's obvious they don't know what they're doing. They just keep having you come back, and nothing's changing. They don't have any new information for you, or they think something's wrong with you mentally. I actually had a doctor one time try to diagnose me with chronic pain disorder. I have degrees in psychology, so I know that's like a psychological problem. And I'm thinking, are you trying to say that I'm not actually in pain because I had a back injury and I'm just crazy? Like, there are doctors who will do that. So I've learned over the years how to handle doctors like that. I come in with my own information. Like, I have a folder. They see me coming down the hall and they're probably like, oh no, here she comes. This is one of those patients who actually expects me to spend more than 2 minutes with her, and she might have questions. It's almost like they get agitated if you have questions, as if you're, I don't know, I'm so respectful. I would never like challenge their authority, but sometimes I do want to, you know, ask questions about my visit, and it makes some people so uncomfortable. So I've just learned, if there's a doctor like that you're going to see, it's probably best that you find another doctor. If they're not a doctor that's willing to look into your situation personally, and they're not willing to look at any of the information that you have. I have had OBGYNs that have been like, wow, you really did your research. You know, this is stuff I haven't even seen. Thank you. Do you mind if I get a copy of this? And that's when you know you have a doctor that may actually try to help you and may actually care. But a lot of doctors nowadays do not. And you know, doctors are very expensive. So do not stay with a doctor who's not willing to help you, or who lets you know kind of up front that they don't know what they're doing. Tell me that, good. Is there possibly somebody you could refer me to? And maybe they won't know, and maybe you're just out on your own again. But just take that into account, that a lot of doctors do not understand PCOS and do not know what to do when it comes to patients like us. I also wanted to touch on a few points that have to do with PCOS and just things that maybe doctors don't tell you or they don't know. You know, there are certain things that come with this health condition that really affect us in our everyday lives. For instance, being so emotional or sometimes feeling like, you know, you are so angry about things. I noticed when my hormones were at my worst, which was at my heaviest weight. My heaviest weight was about 265 pounds, and that was about a year after my husband and I got married. And, you know, I would just be so infuriated about things sometimes, and I had no idea why. That was long before I was diagnosed. And so I realized later on, once I was diagnosed and whatnot, that, you know, when you have hormones, it's almost like people with roid rage, literally, because you end up with so much testosterone and stuff in your system that you have like unrealistic reactions. And it can make you a lot more upset about something that you normally would not even probably be upset about, and you start to wonder, what is wrong with me? Like, why am I having all these strange feelings, or why do I get so upset about or so emotional about things? And it's because our hormones are so out of balance. And I wish I had known that when I was younger, but better than I could share with you now. And the more heavier that I was, the worse that it was. So it did help with losing weight when I did that. I dropped probably about 40 pounds before I had gotten diagnosed, actually, and it seemed to help quite a bit with that part of it. It didn't make my periods come back and whatnot. I had to lose about 30 more pounds on top of that before my periods finally came back. And another thing I wanted to tell you guys is that when I had my tube ligation, after I had my daughter, I have had a period every single month since. Now, what are the chances of that? What happened within my endocrine system? You know, and in my anatomy, you would think they're just tying your tubes together. Why would that make such a change? But it did. It made a huge change in the way that my body processes my hormones. Just everything's a lot more evenly keeled out. And I don't know why. It's so interesting. I've talked to several, you know, OBGYNs about it when I've gone to the doctor, and they're like, that's really interesting. Nobody ever really talks about that. I haven't heard that from anybody else. So here I was, a girl who went my whole life without having regular periods, and then suddenly, as soon as my tubes are tied, I have had a period every single month since my daughter was born, and she's 8.5. So for 8.5 years, I've had a period every single month, which is crazy. And it's kind of, you know, inconvenient, because I'm like, oh God, do girls go through this their whole life? Obviously, girls have periods every month, but when you're used to, you kind of get spoiled, and your husband gets spoiled, of course, because you never have periods. But trust me, the emotional benefits of having a regular cycle and going through that normal cleansing period every month is very beneficial for us. Because I did not have periods, you know, but ever so many years, I actually had to have something similar to a DNC before, which is similar to an abortion, where they had to just clean me out. And it was because I did have an abnormal pap smear one time where they said they found precancerous cells, and having PCOS can lead to uterine cancer or cervical cancer, because, you know, we have a self-cleaning system, and when your body's not cleaning out your system every month, it does build up, and all those cells can build and start to cause a lot of problems. And the doctor was explaining to me, every now and again he'll see a patient that just has to have that done. I had to have a uterine biopsy, which, my God, was, I'm sorry girls if you have to have one, that was the most painful thing I think I've ever been through in my life. It was far worse than labor. I mean, it was way worse than having a baby. I can't describe that pain. It was insane. And it was so quick, and I had such a great doctor. He was so gentle and so kind. He was talking me through every step. I had my husband holding my hand on one side, and the doctor was doing the procedure, and a nurse holding my hand on the other. And he was like, you know, he warned me how it was going to be, and he was right. And it was bad for a little while after that, but it was worth it. Of course, I never ended up with cervical cancer or ovarian cancer, thank God. I already have problems with skin cancer, so I don't need any extra cancers. My whole family has different cancers, so I'm always, you know, concerned about things like that. So I was glad that he caught the cells. But you do need to get your pap smears done every single year. It is of utmost importance for us, especially considering the situation when you're not having periods, or even if you're having periods that are so heavy. I do have a few girlfriends that have PCOS, and they're the opposite of us, to where they bleed and bleed and bleed. I had a girlfriend who bled for like 3 solid months every single day. She was so anemic, they just could not get her to stop bleeding. They were trying all kinds of different things. She finally did, but can you imagine? I can't even imagine what that was like to go through. You know, so there are a lot of different things that doctors don't really tell you, and maybe some doctors don't know, but any information we can share with each other, you know, on my channel or on any boards that you join out there, definitely share with one another. It helps us to kind of cope with this, and the more information that we share, the more we can help somebody else along the way. Alright, you guys, thank you so much for stopping by my channel. I'll be doing more videos about this in the future, and I look forward to talking to you soon. Bye bye.